but are even called Gentiles or unbelievers by God. That is hard, but it is the word of God. But they managed for 1260 years to trample the holy city in the form of the true Sabbath-keeping believers. History cannot be erased. We should learn from it. Rome and its mother church never change. When in the Lateran treaties in 1929, the small Vatican was given back, the political wound of the papacy began to heal slowly. So the question is, when would a pope appear again after 1844, where it could be foreseen that this political wound would be completely healed, and the nations would once again recognize the Pope? Because when we read the history of the two witnesses in Revelation 11, it becomes clear that the persecution of the two modern end-time earthly witnesses of God must come through this strengthened papacy. That is exactly the context of this chapter. From the Orion message, we know that the investigative judgment of the dead lasted 168 years, and then the judgment of the living began. This period of change in judgment clearly points to 2012 to 2014. Well, it's easy for us to find out whether a new pope was elected at that time. Looking back, we can identify who that pope was. It was Pope Francis, because Pope Francis was the first Jesuit pope ever, a general of the army of the enemy. And he was allowed to preach before the United Nations on September 25, 2015, which represents all the nations of the world. Thus, in the time of the investigative judgment of the living, the papacy not only regained the power over the kings of Europe, which it had lost at that time, but through Pope Francis, it also regained power over all the nations of the world. And on September 24, just one day earlier, he even spoke before both chambers of the U.S. government, the second beast in the New World. With all his power, he included not only Europe, not only the whole world, but especially the United States, the place where the Protestants once fled to. Someone might object and say that 4 predecessors of Francis had already spoken before the UN. Yes, but that was long before the investigative judgment of the living began. They were not Jesuits. They did not speak before both chambers of Congress, and the earthly 2 witnesses were not yet together at that time. It is as simple as that, and only this Jesuit would be the one responsible for a worldwide vaccination attack against the people of God, or at least the one pulling the strings. We'll get back to that in a moment. There's no doubt about it. Everything points to Pope Francis. The picture of Pope Francis among the masses is not from March 13, when he was elected, because that is only an election. Remember how it works with all elections. First, the politicians are elected, and then you wait a while until they come into power, when their term of office begins, when their inauguration takes place. This picture here is from March 19, 2013. It was 6 days after his election on March 13. That is the photo and the day when he came into power, when he had his first major mass on St. Peter's Square. Here he received the fisherman's ring and his throne. What did the two modern witnesses immediately begin to do when this Jesuit took the throne? Preach, but in sackcloth. Because on the one hand, they tried to be humble co-workers of God. Preaching in sackcloth also means giving a message that is not very pleasant, but rather sad, serious, or a warning. And at that time, they simply did not have accompanying heavenly signs that would have given strength, courage, and certainty. Today, this is very different, as you can notice in the newer videos. Nevertheless, at that time, they received a certain power to preach. Eagerly, we protested as a small ministry against this Pope with a whole article series. One day before his inauguration, in the original language, English, on March 18, 2013, until April 2015, and later with many other articles condemning his LGBT friendliness. But we were not heard, and heavenly signs did not accompany us. We wore sackcloth. At that time, we even thought Pope Francis was already Peter the Roman. The beast from the bottomless pit is even the title of the first article we wrote about Pope Francis. The beast from the bottomless pit. One day before his inauguration, we published this article in English to warn the world. Now comes the Pope who will end world time. Now comes the Pope under whom the wound of the beast heals. Wow. He once declared, "I am the Antichrist." He himself said, "I am Christ." We proclaimed to the world what we had discovered, and at exactly the right time. This is the beginning of our ministry in the earthly events related to the topic of the papacy that the world would see. People saw Pope Francis in the crowds. All Catholics looked there, and even the Protestants said, "Oh, wow, the first Jesuit Pope. That is not a good sign. The time of trouble must have begun." Now you understand why we let the 1260 literal days of verse 3 of the modern two witnesses begin on March 19, 2013. After we understood the modern two witnesses as our ministry, symbolically pointing to two representatives of our ministry who came together in 2012 in Paraguay, we should no longer double the days, because they worked together during the same time. From the perspective of the olive tree point in Orion, the Father says something and the Son confirms it in the heavens. That was the doubling of the time periods of the two witnesses since the publication of the Orion message in 2010. But from March 19, 2013 onward, we now consider the earthly perspective of Jesus at the cross. This perspective shows the two witnesses working together at the same time in earthly events in Paraguay. Let's calculate forward how long these 1260 days of preaching in sackcloth lasted. What is the result and the date when they end? The prophecy states that the beast would overcome them and kill them. What is the date of the killing? With the calculation, we arrive at August 29, 2016, counting inclusively, as the end of the 1260 days. This was shortly before our sacrificial prayer in 2016. It is a very important date. Was there an event so terrible that the next time frame of the prophecy in Revelation 11 would begin? Let's read. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them and kill them. This beast, the papacy, now does something that hurts the witnesses and will overcome them and kill them. We must understand that the two witnesses symbolically represent all Protestants who protested against Pope Francis. Not only us. We did much, but this prophecy refers to all believers in Christ who protested. They preached against Pope Francis, but something happened that they would not see. And we did not see it at that time either. Something happened in the background. Pope Francis pushed something forward without us noticing, and instead we were, prophetically speaking, dead. What was the terrible event? Let's first find out what the bottomless pit really is. We understood the bottomless pit as the black hole, Sagittarius A star, which is here in Sagittarius. You already know this from many videos. If someone falls into a black hole, do they come out on the other side again? No. Bad news. If someone falls into a black hole, they will never come out again. Not even light escapes. It's gone. It has no bottom. This here is a black hole. This is the black hole at the center of our galaxy, right here. Now, guess when Pope Francis's birthday is? On December 17, when the sun is directly at the black hole. He is the one who rises up out of the bottomless pit. The next verse with a time reference is verse 9. And they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. These 3.5 days correspond to the 1290 days of Daniel 12. Verse 11, as I showed in the time key table earlier. Let's also read this verse. And from the time that the daily shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. We see that the end of these 1,290 days points to March 11, 2020. And many of you will certainly hear the alarm bells ringing. That was the official declaration of the COVID pandemic. You can already see where this is going, and that Pope Francis must have something to do with it. So he has something to do with the fifth trumpet and the first woe, the COVID vaccination, where smoke and locusts also come up out of the bottomless pit. What happened in 2016 as preparation for establishing the abomination that came after 1290 days? If Revelation had been understood beforehand, it could have been predicted that the abomination of desolation would be set up on March 11, 2020. That would mean the abomination, the pandemic, and the resulting destruction through the mRNA vaccination. But we were dead for 1290 days. We did not see what was coming upon the earth. We only saw it when the lockdowns came. The beast, Francis, overwhelmed us with his hidden preparations for the vaccination attack. He planned the attack on the world. Pope Francis is exposed by the prophecy of Revelation 11 as the driving force behind all this vaccine development. So let's now move forward step by step and look at these two dates in August 2016. ChatGPT compiled here a few key points for the time before 2016. That is, developments during the time when the two witnesses preached in sackcloth. Until 2015, mRNA technology was still considered experimental. So while Pope Francis delivered his speeches in the USA, this technology was still considered experimental. And when it was then used starting in 2020, it was considered safe, even though it was the biggest global experiment ever. Isn't that crazy? mRNA was too unstable and degraded too quickly in the body. Strong immune reactions occurred, which were viewed as side effects. Major pharmaceutical companies were skeptical. However, several researchers had already been studying chemically modified mRNA since 2005. mRNA that was more stable and caused fewer inflammatory responses. Between 2010 and 2015, several biotech startups, Moderna in the USA, BioNTech in Germany, and CureVac in Germany, worked on applications for cancer vaccines and infectious diseases. Despite skepticism, research continued, especially in the field of cancer and infection treatment. By the way, what is Trump doing right now? He said that billions and billions of dollars will be provided for the development of mRNA vaccines so that every single person can receive a personalized cancer vaccine with the help of AI. But the price is that your DNA will be altered from the DNA that Jesus gave you. It's tempting because who would not want to be healed? Nevertheless, hands off. ChatGPT continues to write. The milestone year 2016, so that is quite interesting for us because this is exactly where we have our two important dates in August 2016. 2016 was the year when mRNA vaccines entered clinical trials for the first time and gained WHO-related attention. Several key events took place. WHO and the Global Vaccination Strategy. In August 2016, the 8th WHO Conference on the Development of Influenza Vaccines was held, August 23rd to 24th, 2016. There, the concept of so-called universal influenza vaccines was discussed. Vaccines that could be based on novel platforms such as mRNA. RNA. This was the first time that mRNA-based approaches were officially mentioned and strategically considered within the WHO framework as future vaccine platforms. So here, for the first time, the WHO enters the picture. And that is very, very interesting. And now we are already in August. We are looking for the 29th and 30th of August as the transition between the 1260 days and the beginning of the 1290 days. So this was the first conference where the topic of vaccinating the world was discussed. In 2016, when a few months later we would bring our sacrifice. What exactly marks the beginning of the 1290 days? The groundbreaking scientific publications, as we are about to read. At the conference, they decided that the scientists should continue developing the deadly vaccine. ChatGPT continues. At the end of August 2016, two landmark papers were published that paved the way for the later COVID-19 mRNA vaccine technology. In the journal Nature, August 29, 2016, self-amplifying mRNA vaccines express antigens at high levels in vivo and protect against influenza virus challenge.